The platinum envelope felt heavier than it should have as Talia Martinez held it in her trembling hands, the black Amex card catching the dim light of her apartment hallway. Just 12 hours earlier, she had been serving coffee and dodging rude customers at Rosie's diner, never imagining that standing up to one arrogant billionaire would lead to this moment. The note inside contained only 7 words that would change everything. Let's see what you build. But how did a single act of courage in front of a crowded restaurant transform a struggling waitress's life forever? The answer lay in what happened when she refused to stay silent, when she chose dignity over tips, and when she discovered that sometimes the most powerful people are watching when you least expect it. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning sun cast long shadows across the checkered floor of Rosie's diner as Talia Martinez tied her apron strings with practiced efficiency. Saturday brunch was always the most challenging shift, a relentless parade of demanding customers, split coffee, and the constant pressure to smile through exhaustion. At 26, Talia had been working at the diner for 3 years, saving every penny she could toward her dream of opening her own community center in the neighborhood where she grew up. The tips weren't much, but they were consistent, and consistency was something she valued above all else in her uncertain world. She surveyed the dining room with the sharp eye of someone who had learned to read people quickly. The regulars were already settling into their usual spots, newspaper readers claiming the corner booths, young couples holding hands across sticky tables, and the occasional business meeting conducted over plates of eggs Benedict. The familiar chaos of clinking silverware and overlapping conversations created a symphony she had long since learned to navigate with grace. "Talia, table 7 needs more coffee," called out Marcus, the weekend cook, his voice carrying over the sizzle of bacon on the griddle. She nodded, grabbing the pot from the warmer and weaving through the maze of tables with the fluid movements of someone who had perfected the art of efficient service. The diner was her second home, and despite the challenges, she took pride in her work, treating each customer with the same respect she hoped to receive in return. The morning rush was building steadily when she noticed the black town car pulling up outside. Through the large windows, she watched as a man in an expensive suit emerged, his movements deliberate and entitled. He was tall, perhaps in his early 40s, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of confident stride that suggested he was accustomed to having doors opened for him. Behind him followed a young woman in a designer dress, her nervous energy a stark contrast to his commanding presence. They approached the hostess stand where Jenny, the teenage hostess, greeted them with her usual bright smile. Talia watched as the man surveyed the restaurant with obvious disdain, his eyes lingering on the worn vinyl booths and dated decor. When Jenny led them to a table in Talia's section, she caught fragments of their conversation as they settled in. "I can't believe you suggested this place, Rebecca," the man said, his voice carrying despite his apparent attempt at discretion. "I thought you had better taste than this." The woman, Rebecca, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I just thought it would be nice to try somewhere different. Somewhere real." "Real?" He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "This is what passes for real? Look around you, sweetheart. This is exactly the kind of place that represents everything wrong with the working class mentality. No ambition, no standards, just accepting mediocrity as if it's a virtue." Talia felt her jaw tighten as she approached their table, menu in hand and professional smile firmly in place. She had heard similar comments before, usually from customers who thought their money entitled them to treat service workers as less than human, but something about this man's casual cruelty struck her as particularly offensive. "Good morning," she said pleasantly, setting the menus down. "I'm Talia, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you with some coffee?" The man barely glanced at her, continuing his critique of the restaurant's perceived shortcomings. "The thing is, Rebecca, people like this," he gestured vaguely in Talia's direction, They lack the drive to better themselves. They're content to serve other people's dreams instead of pursuing their own. Rebecca's face flushed with embarrassment. Maybe we should look at the menu. No, no, this is educational, he continued, warming to his theme. You see, the fundamental problem with the service industry is that it attracts people who have given up on themselves. They've accepted their station in life, and they expect society to subsidize their lack of ambition through tips and sympathy. Talia stood perfectly still, her training warring with her instinct to defend not just herself, but every hard-working person who had ever served him a meal or cleaned his office. She thought of her mother, who had worked 2 jobs to support them after her father left, and of her neighbors who juggled multiple responsibilities while pursuing their dreams. The man's words weren't just insulting. They were willfully ignorant of the realities faced by millions of working people. I'll give you a few more minutes to look over the menu, she said evenly, though her hands trembled slightly as she turned away. As she walked back toward the kitchen, she heard him continue his monologue, his voice growing louder and more animated as he found his rhythm. The whole tipping culture is a perfect example of how we've enabled this mentality. Instead of providing real value, they expect handouts for doing the absolute minimum required. Other customers were beginning to notice the disturbance, conversations quieting as people turned to look at the well-dressed man holding court in the corner booth. Talia caught the eye of Mrs. Patterson, a regular who came in every Saturday with her grandchildren, and saw her own frustration reflected in the elderly woman's expression. When she returned to take their order, the man was gesturing expansively, clearly enjoying his audience of one. The solution is simple, really. If people had to actually compete on merit, instead of relying on charity disguised as wages, we'd see a much more efficient allocation of human resources. What can I get for you today? Talia asked, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her chest. This time, the man looked directly at her, and she saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. I'll have the eggs Benedict, but I want the hollandaise on the side. And make sure the eggs are properly poached, not those overcooked disasters you probably usually serve, Rebecca ordered quietly, her discomfort evident in every word. When Talia moved to refill their water glasses, the man continued his performance, now apparently addressing his comments directly to her. You know what your problem is? He said, leaning back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone who believed he was dispensing wisdom. You think showing up and doing the bare minimum entitles you to a living wage, but in the real world, value is determined by what you can produce, not by how many hours you stand behind a counter. The restaurant had grown noticeably quieter, the weight of his words settling over the dining room like a toxic cloud, and Talia felt every eye in the place watching her, waiting to see how she would respond to this public humiliation. Her heart pounded as she considered her options, knowing that her response could cost her the job she desperately needed. I understand you have opinions about service workers, she said carefully, but perhaps we could focus on your meal. He laughed, a sound that cut through the tension like a blade. Opinions? These aren't opinions, they're facts. And here's another fact. He raised his voice, ensuring the entire restaurant could hear. If you people spent half as much energy improving yourselves as you do complaining about your circumstances, maybe you wouldn't be stuck in dead-end jobs your whole lives. The silence that followed was deafening. Talia could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, and the rapid beating of her own heart. She looked around the room and saw faces she recognized, people who worked hard every day, who cared for their families, who contributed to their community in countless ways. She thought of her own dreams, of the community center she hoped to build, of the children she wanted to help, and something inside her snapped. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent restaurant. "I need to clarify something." The man looked up with surprise, clearly not expecting a response. "Oh, please do. Enlighten us." Talia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her like armor. You seem to have some misconceptions about the people who work in service industries, and I think it's important to correct them. This should be interesting, he said, folding his arms across his chest with an amused expression. You're right that this is a diner, she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. It's not a five-star restaurant, and we don't pretend to be. But the people who work here, the people who serve you, who cook your food, who clean your table, they're not here because they lack ambition or drive. They're here because they're working toward something better. The man's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Working toward what, exactly? I'm working toward opening a community center for at-risk youth, she said, standing straighter. My colleague Marcus over there is putting himself through culinary school while supporting his disabled sister. Jenny at the hostess stand is saving money for college while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. We're not here because we've given up on ourselves. We're here because we understand that honest work has dignity, regardless of the setting. A murmur of approval rippled through the dining room, and Talia felt the energy shift in her favor. But she wasn't finished. You talk about merit and competition, but you've demonstrated nothing but disrespect since you walked in here. You've insulted the establishment, the staff, and, by extension, every person in this room who works for a living. That's not merit, that's arrogance. The man's face had darkened, his casual superiority replaced by something sharper and more dangerous. You're forgetting yourself. I'm a customer, and you're nothing but a waitress. I could have you fired with a single phone call. You're absolutely right, Talia said, untying her apron with deliberate slowness. You are a customer, and I am a waitress. But that doesn't mean I have to stand here and listen to you devalue the work that I do and the people I work with. Your money doesn't buy you the right to be cruel. She set her apron on the table in front of him, the gesture carrying more weight than any words could have. Your Eggs Benedict will be ready in a few minutes. I'm sure someone else will be happy to serve you. The applause started slowly, a single customer clapping from the back corner. Then Mrs. Patterson joined in, her weathered hands creating a steady rhythm. Within moments, the entire restaurant was clapping, the sound building to a crescendo that filled the space with something that felt like justice. Talia walked toward the kitchen, her legs shaking with adrenaline and the magnitude of what she had just done. She had never quit a job before, had never made such a public stand, but she felt no regret. Some lines couldn't be crossed, some disrespect couldn't be tolerated, regardless of the consequences. Marcus looked up from the grill as she entered the kitchen, his face a mixture of concern and admiration. That was incredible, he said, flipping the eggs for the man's order. I've never seen anyone stand up to a customer like that. I probably just made the biggest mistake of my life, she admitted, leaning against the prep counter as the reality of her situation began to sink in. I need this job, Marcus. I need the money. You did the right thing, he said firmly. Some things are more important than money. Through the service window, she could see the man and his date leaving, his face red with anger and embarrassment. Rebecca looked back once, and Talia thought she saw something like gratitude in her expression before they disappeared through the front door. The manager, Doug, appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face unreadable. Talia braced herself for the inevitable confrontation, the lecture about customer service and professional conduct. Instead, he picked up her apron from where she had left it and held it out to her. That guy was way out of line, he said quietly. I should have stepped in earlier. Your job is safe if you want it. She took the apron, her hands still trembling slightly. I'm sorry for making a scene. Don't be. That's the kind of scene that needed to be made. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of congratulations and support from customers and coworkers alike. People who had witnessed the confrontation made a point of thanking her, sharing their own stories of dealing with entitled customers, and expressing their admiration for her courage. By the time she clocked out, Talia felt emotionally drained but strangely energized, as if she had crossed some invisible threshold and could never go back to simply accepting poor treatment. The walk home to her small apartment took 20 minutes through neighborhoods that were slowly changing, gentrification creeping in block by block. She lived in a converted warehouse building that had been divided into affordable units, mostly occupied by young people trying to make their way in the world. The building had character, with exposed brick walls and high ceilings, but it also had temperamental plumbing and heating that worked only when it wanted to. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, her feet aching from the long shift and her mind still processing the events of the day. The hallway smelled of cooking spices and distant music, the sounds of her neighbors living their lives creating a comforting backdrop to her thoughts. Her apartment was small, but she had made it her own, with plants covering the fire escape windows and photographs of her family and friends creating a gallery wall above her second-hand couch. She had painted the walls a warm yellow that made even the gloomiest days feel brighter, and she had arranged her furniture to create distinct spaces for sleeping, eating, and working on her community center plans. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, finally allowing herself to fully absorb what had happened. She had stood up to a man who clearly wielded significant power, had publicly challenged his worldview, and had done so without a safety net. The potential consequences were still unknown, but for the first time in years, she felt like she had acted in complete alignment with her values. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Heard about what happened at the diner. Mrs. Rodriguez was there with her grandson. She said you were magnificent. I'm proud of you, mija." The validation from her mother, who had always emphasized the importance of dignity and self-respect, brought tears to her eyes. She had been raised to believe that all honest work was honorable, that treating people with respect was not optional, and that standing up for what was right sometimes required personal sacrifice. As evening fell, she made herself a simple dinner and tried to focus on her plans for the community center, spreading architectural sketches and budget projections across her small dining table. The project had been her obsession for 2 years, a vision of a place where neighborhood kids could come for tutoring, art classes, and mentorship. She had identified a vacant lot that could be purchased affordably, had reached out to potential donors and volunteers, and had even obtained preliminary approval from the city planning department, but funding remained the biggest obstacle. The amount she needed was substantial, more than she could save from her waitressing wages in any reasonable time frame. She had applied for grants, had organized small fundraisers, and had even considered taking out a loan, but the numbers never quite added up. The confrontation at the diner had reinforced her determination, but it had also reminded her of the financial realities that constrained her options. She was reviewing her latest grant application when she heard the sound of a car engine outside her window. Living on the 3rd floor, she rarely paid attention to street noise, but something about the deep, quiet hum of this particular vehicle made her look up. Through the gauze curtains, she could see a sleek black SUV parked directly in front of her building, its tinted windows revealing nothing about its occupants. The engine shut off, and she watched as the driver's door opened. A man in a dark suit emerged, his movements efficient and professional. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. But instead of another passenger, he retrieved a silver briefcase from the seat. Talia felt a chill of unease as she watched him approach her building. There was something official about his demeanor, something that suggested this was not a random visit. She wondered if the man from the diner had somehow tracked her down, if there would be legal consequences for her public confrontation. The intercom buzzed, startling her from her thoughts. She approached the device hesitantly, unsure whether to respond. "Yes? Ms. Martinez? I have a delivery for you." The voice was polite, professional, revealing nothing about the nature of the delivery or the identity of the sender. She considered not answering, but curiosity overrode her caution. "I'll be right down." She slipped on her shoes and made her way down the stairs, her mind racing through possibilities. The driver was waiting in the small lobby, briefcase in hand, and she was struck by how ordinary he looked, despite the expensive car and formal attire. He was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a respectful demeanor that put her somewhat at ease. "Ms. Talia Martinez?" he asked, and she nodded. "I have something for you." He opened the briefcase, revealing a platinum envelope that seemed to glow in the dim lobby lighting. The paper was thick and expensive, her name written across the front in elegant calligraphy. She took it with trembling hands, surprised by its weight. "What is this?" "I was instructed to tell you that someone was impressed by your actions today," he said simply. "Someone who believes in investing in character." Before she could ask more questions, he was gone, leaving her alone in the lobby with the mysterious envelope. She climbed the stairs slowly, turning the envelope over in her hands, looking for clues about its origin. There was no return address, no identifying marks, nothing to indicate who had sent it or why. Back in her apartment, she sat at her kitchen table and carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a black credit card, sleek and heavy, with her name embossed in silver letters. She had never seen anything like it, the card itself seeming to radiate wealth and exclusivity. Beneath the card was a single sheet of paper, the same expensive pica stock as the envelope, with a message written in the same elegant script. "Your courage today reminded me why I fell in love with this country in the first place. Real strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. I'd been watching, and I'm impressed. Let's see what you build. The card has no limit. Use it wisely." There was no signature, no identification, nothing to indicate who had sent this incredible gift. Talia stared at the card and the note, trying to process what was happening. Someone had been watching her confrontation at the diner, had somehow obtained her address, and had decided to give her what appeared to be unlimited financial resources. The implications were staggering. With unlimited funds, she could immediately begin work on the community center. She could quit her job at the diner, hire architects and contractors, purchase equipment and supplies, and make her dream a reality within months rather than years. But the gift came with questions that made her deeply uncomfortable. Who was this anonymous benefactor? What did they want in return? How had they obtained her personal information so quickly? And most importantly, what were the strings attached to such an extravagant gift? She spent the next hour researching the credit card company, trying to understand what she was dealing with. The card was issued by a private wealth management firm that catered exclusively to ultra-high net worth individuals. The very existence of such a card suggested that her benefactor possessed extraordinary wealth, the kind of resources that could change not just her life, but the lives of everyone in her community. The more she learned, the more conflicted she became. On one hand, this was the answer to her prayers, the miraculous intervention that could transform her dreams into reality. On the other hand, accepting such a gift from a complete stranger felt dangerous and potentially compromising. She thought about the man from the diner, about his casual cruelty and his assumption that money entitled him to treat others poorly. Was this benefactor any different? Were they trying to buy her silence, to turn her into another person whose principles could be purchased? But then she read the note again, focusing on the phrase, "Real strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult." This didn't sound like someone trying to buy her compliance. It sounded like someone who genuinely admired her courage and wanted to support her dreams. She decided to call the number on the back of the card, hoping to speak with someone who could provide more information about the benefactor and their intentions. The phone was answered immediately by a professional-sounding woman who seemed to be expecting her call. "Good evening, Ms. Martinez. I understand you have questions about your account." "I have questions about everything," Talia said. "Who sent this card? What do they want? Why me?" "I'm afraid I can't provide specific information about the account holder," the woman said apologetically. I can tell you that your account has been activated and is ready for use. There are no interest charges, no fees, and no preset spending limit. The account holder has requested that you use the resources as you see fit, with the understanding that you will apply the same principles you demonstrated today. What principles? Standing up for what's right, treating people with dignity, using strength to help others rather than to harm them. The conversation continued for several minutes, but Talia learned little more about the mysterious benefactor. The representative was polite, but firm in her refusal to provide identifying information, explaining that the account holder valued privacy above all else. After hanging up, Talia sat in her kitchen as night fell around her, turning the black card over in her hands. She thought about her mother's advice, about the importance of accepting help when it was offered in good faith. She thought about the children in her neighborhood who needed safe places to learn and grow. She thought about the potential she could unlock with unlimited resources and the responsibility that came with such power. Finally, she thought about the man from the diner and his assertion that people like her lacked ambition and drive. Perhaps this was the universe's way of providing her with the opportunity to prove him wrong, to show that given the resources, working-class people could achieve extraordinary things. She made her decision. She would accept the gift, but she would do so on her own terms. She would use the resources to build something meaningful, something that would benefit her community and honor the courage that had apparently inspired this generosity. And she would do it without compromising the principles that had gotten her into this situation in the first place. The next morning, she called in sick to the diner and spent the day researching contractors, architects, and suppliers. With unlimited funds, she could hire the best people, purchase the finest materials, and create a community center that would serve as a model for similar projects across the country. She started with the architect, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had designed several community centers in other cities. Patricia was initially skeptical when Talia explained her funding situation, but a quick call to the credit card company confirmed that the account was legitimate and that funds were available immediately. "This is incredible," Patricia said, reviewing Talia's sketches and plans. "With this kind of budget, we can create something truly special. When do you want to start?" "Immediately," Talia said. "I've been waiting for this opportunity for 2 years. I don't want to waste another day." Over the following weeks, Talia threw herself into the project with an intensity that surprised even her. She met with contractors, reviewed designs, selected materials, and coordinated with city officials. The black card worked exactly as promised, allowing her to make purchases and payments without any questions or delays. The community center began to take shape rapidly, its modern design incorporating elements that reflected the neighborhood's character while providing state-of-the-art facilities for education, recreation, and community gatherings. Talia insisted on hiring local workers whenever possible, ensuring that the project would benefit the community economically as well as socially. Word of the project spread quickly through the neighborhood, generating excitement and curiosity. People stopped by the construction site daily, offering suggestions, volunteering their time, and expressing their gratitude for what Talia was creating. The center was becoming a symbol of hope and possibility, proof that dreams could become reality with determination and resources. But Talia never forgot the mysterious benefactor who had made it all possible. She often wondered if they were watching the project's progress, if they were satisfied with how she was using their gift. She hoped that when the center opened, it would justify their faith in her and validate their decision to invest in her vision. 3 months after the confrontation at the diner, the community center was nearing completion. The building was beautiful, with large windows that filled the spaces with natural light, flexible rooms that could accommodate various activities, and a central courtyard that would serve as a gathering place for the community. Talia stood in the main hall, surrounded by boxes of equipment and supplies, preparing for the grand opening that was scheduled for the following week. The space was everything she had dreamed of, and more, a testament to what was possible when resources were combined with passion and purpose. She was reviewing the final details when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw a man in an expensive suit approaching, and her heart skipped a beat as she recognized him. It was the billionaire from the diner, the man whose cruelty had sparked the chain of events that led to this moment. "Ms. Martinez," he said, his voice lacking the arrogance she remembered. "I was hoping I could have a word with you." She faced him squarely, no longer the intimidated waitress who had served him coffee months earlier. "What can I do for you, Mr. Harrison?" David Harrison. He looked around the impressive space, taking in the quality of the construction and the scope of the project. "I heard about what you've built here. It's quite remarkable." "Thank you," she said cautiously, unsure of his intentions. "I came to apologize," he said, his words surprising her. "My behavior at the diner was inexcusable. I was trying to impress someone, and I did so at the expense of your dignity and the dignity of everyone who works in service industries. I was wrong." Talia studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity or calculation. But he seemed genuinely remorseful, his previous arrogance replaced by something that looked like humility. "I appreciate the apology," she said, "but I'm curious why you're here now." "Because I've been thinking about what you said that day, about dignity and honest work and treating people with respect. You were right, and I was wrong, and I wanted to tell you that in person." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their previous encounter hanging between them. Finally, Harrison spoke again. "I also wanted to ask you something. I know you don't owe me anything, but I was wondering if you might consider letting me contribute to your project. I have resources that could help you expand your programs, reach more children, make an even bigger impact." Talia considered his offer, remembering the note that had accompanied the black card. Real strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Perhaps this was Harrison's attempt to do exactly that, to use his wealth for good rather than to demean others. "I'd be willing to consider it," she said finally. "But any contribution would need to come without strings, without attempts to control or influence the center's programs. This is a community project, not a vanity project." "I understand," he said. "And I accept those terms." As they shook hands, Talia reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. A single act of courage had led to a mysterious gift, which had led to the realization of her dreams, which had now led to the possibility of even greater impact. She still didn't know who had sent the black card, but she was beginning to understand that the gift was about more than money. It was about the power of standing up for what was right, the importance of treating all people with dignity, and the potential for positive change when resources were combined with good intentions. The community center opened the following week to enormous fanfare. Hundreds of people from the neighborhood attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, including many of Talia's former colleagues from the diner. The center was everything she had envisioned and more, a bright, welcoming space that would serve the community for generations to come. During her speech at the opening ceremony, Talia spoke about the importance of believing in dreams, of treating all people with respect, and of using whatever resources you have to make a positive difference in the world. She didn't mention the mysterious benefactor or the black card, but she hoped that whoever had made this possible was watching and was proud of what had been accomplished. As the celebration continued into the evening, Talia found herself standing in the courtyard, watching children play on the new playground equipment and families exploring the various program rooms. The center was already fulfilling its purpose, bringing people together and providing opportunities for learning and growth. She thought about the man from the diner and his assumptions about working-class people, about their lack of ambition and their acceptance of mediocrity. Looking around at the thriving community center, at the programs that were already being planned, at the lives that would be changed by this resource, she knew that he had been profoundly wrong. The black card remained in her wallet, a reminder of the mysterious benefactor who had believed in her potential. She had used it responsibly, investing in something that would benefit many people rather than enriching herself. The community center was proof that when working-class people are given resources and opportunities, they can achieve extraordinary things. As the months passed, the center became an integral part of the neighborhood, hosting after-school programs, adult education classes, community meetings, and cultural events. Children who had previously had few safe places to gather now had somewhere to go after school, somewhere to get help with homework, somewhere to explore their interests and develop their talents. Talia left her job at the diner to work full-time as the center's director, but she never forgot the lessons she had learned there. She treated everyone who entered the center with the same respect and dignity she had always shown her customers, regardless of their background or circumstances. She understood that true strength came not from wealth or power, but from the courage to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult. The mysterious benefactor never revealed their identity, but Talia occasionally received notes of encouragement and support. The messages were always brief and always focused on the importance of using her resources to help others. She began to understand that the gift was not just about building a community center, but about demonstrating that character and courage were more valuable than money, that treating people with dignity was more important than personal gain. Years later, when the center had expanded to include job training programs, a health clinic, and a small business incubator, Talia would sometimes think back to that Saturday morning at the diner. She would remember the man's cruel words, her decision to speak up, and the mysterious gift that had changed everything. She would wonder if the benefactor had known what would happen when they sent the black card, if they had anticipated the ripple effects of their generosity. But mostly, she would think about the children who used the center every day, the families who had found support and community there, and the neighborhood that had been transformed by the presence of this resource. She would think about the power of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult, and the amazing things that could happen when someone believed in you enough to give you the tools to succeed. The black card had been more than a gift. It had been a test, a challenge, and an opportunity. Talia had used it to build something meaningful, something that would outlast her and continue to benefit people long after she was gone. She had proven that working-class people, given the resources and opportunities, could achieve extraordinary things. And she had done it while maintaining the principles that had gotten her into this situation in the first place. Treating people with dignity, standing up for what was right, and using whatever power she had to help others. In the end, the most important lesson was not about money or power, but about character. The anonymous benefactor had seen something in Talia that day at the diner, something that convinced them she was worthy of their investment. They had seen courage, integrity, and the kind of strength that comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. And they had been right to believe in her. The community center stood as a monument to the power of believing in people, to the importance of treating everyone with dignity, and to the incredible things that were possible when resources were combined with good intentions. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful people are watching when you least expect it, and that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, can change not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. The success of the community center began to attract attention from beyond the neighborhood. Local news stations ran features about the remarkable transformation. City officials visited to study the model for potential replication, and other communities reached out asking for advice on starting similar projects. Talia found herself becoming an inadvertent spokesperson for community development, invited to speak at conferences and meetings about the power of grassroots organizing and adequate funding. During one such presentation at City Hall, she was approached by a woman in her 50s with silver hair and an expensive handbag. The woman had been sitting in the back row, taking notes throughout Talia's speech about the importance of believing in community potential. "Ms. Martinez," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Chen, and I've been following your work with great interest. I represent a foundation that invests in community development projects, and we'd like to discuss expanding your model to other cities." Talia shook her hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. "That's very flattering, but I'm not sure the center is ready for that kind of expansion." "Oh, but it is," Victoria said with a knowing smile. "You've created something special here, something that could transform communities across the country. We have the resources to help you scale this impact." They met the following week at a downtown restaurant, where Victoria laid out an ambitious proposal. Her foundation was prepared to fund the development of 20 similar community centers across the state, with Talia serving as the director of operations. The budget was staggering, enough to create jobs for hundreds of people and serve thousands of families. "This is incredible," Talia said, reviewing the proposal documents. "But I have to ask, why me? Why this project?" Victoria smiled mysteriously. "Sometimes people with vision and integrity are hard to find. When we encounter them, we like to invest in their potential." The conversation reminded Talia of the mysterious benefactor who had started her journey with the black card. There was something familiar about Victoria's phrasing, the emphasis on character and integrity. But when she tried to probe further, Victoria skillfully redirected the conversation to the technical details of the expansion plan. Over the following months, Talia worked with Victoria's foundation to develop the expansion strategy. They identified communities with similar demographics and needs, recruited local leaders who shared Talia's vision, and began the process of securing properties and permits. The work was exhausting but exhilarating. The opportunity to multiply the impact of her original center beyond anything she had imagined. The first new center opened in a neighborhood across town, followed by locations in 3 nearby cities. Each one was tailored to its specific community while maintaining the core principles that had made the original center successful. Talia traveled constantly, training new directors, troubleshooting challenges, and ensuring that each location maintained the same commitment to dignity and respect that had inspired the original project. During the opening ceremony for the 5th center, Talia was surprised to see David Harrison in the crowd. He had been true to his word about supporting the original center, contributing both financial resources and volunteer time. His transformation from arrogant billionaire to committed community advocate had been remarkable to witness. "I wanted to see how the model was working in different communities," he explained when she approached him after the ceremony. "It's incredible what you've accomplished. It's incredible what communities can accomplish when they have the resources and support they need," she corrected gently. "I'm just the facilitator." "That's exactly the kind of humility that makes this work," he said. "You never lost sight of the fact that this is about serving others, not about personal glory." As they talked, Talia noticed Victoria Chen approaching, her expression unreadable. When she reached them, she nodded politely to Harrison. "David, I'm glad you could make it," she said. "How are you finding the expansion?" Talia looked between them, suddenly realizing they knew each other. "You two have met before?" "We've been colleagues for many years," Victoria said smoothly. "David serves on the board of our foundation." The pieces began to fall into place in Talia's mind. The mysterious benefactor, the black card, the foundation's interest in her work, David Harrison's transformation and support. She looked at both of them with new understanding. "It was you," she said quietly. "You sent the black card." Victoria and David exchanged glances, and David nodded slowly. "We did, but the decision to use it wisely was entirely yours." "Why?" Talia asked. "Why the secrecy? Why not just approach me directly?" "Because we wanted to see what you would do with unlimited resources and no strings attached," Victoria explained. "We wanted to test your character, your priorities, your commitment to your stated values. And you passed every test," David added. "You used the resources to help others, you maintained your principles, and you built something that will outlast all of us." Talia felt a mixture of emotions, grateful for the opportunity, but also slightly unsettled by the realization that she had been watched and evaluated. What if I had failed the test? What if I had used the card for personal gain? Then we would have known you weren't the right person to lead this kind of expansion, Victoria said simply. But we were confident that wouldn't happen. Your actions at the diner weren't just about standing up to rudeness. They were about defending the dignity of all working people. That kind of character doesn't disappear when money becomes available. Over the following weeks, Talia processed this revelation and what it meant for her work. She realized that the test had never really ended, that every decision she made about the centers was being evaluated against the principles she had demonstrated that day at the diner. But rather than feeling pressured, she felt supported, knowing that she had allies who shared her values and were committed to helping her succeed. The expansion continued, with new centers opening every few months. Each location became a hub of community activity, providing services and opportunities that transformed neighborhoods and lives. Talia developed a comprehensive training program for center directors, emphasizing the importance of community engagement, cultural sensitivity, and the fundamental belief that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. One particularly meaningful moment came during the opening of the 10th center, located in a predominantly Latino neighborhood similar to the one where Talia had grown up. Her mother attended the ceremony, her eyes bright with pride as she watched her daughter speak to the crowd about the importance of community and the power of believing in people's potential. "Your father would be so proud," her mother whispered as they cut the ribbon together. "He always said you would do something important with your life." The emotional weight of the moment was almost overwhelming. Talia thought about the journey that had brought her to this point, from the struggling waitress who had stood up to a rude customer to the director of a multi-million-dollar community development initiative. The transformation had been remarkable, but she never forgot the values that had guided her from the beginning. As the network of centers grew, Talia began to attract attention from national media and policymakers. She was invited to Washington to speak about community development strategies, appeared on television to discuss the importance of investing in working-class communities, and was profiled in several major magazines as an example of effective grassroots leadership. But the recognition that meant the most to her came from the communities themselves. Children who had learned to read in the center's after-school programs, adults who had found jobs through the employment training initiatives, families who had found support and connection through the various programs. These were the real measures of success, the proof that the mysterious benefactor's investment had been worthwhile. The original center in her neighborhood had become a model for community development, studied by researchers and replicated by other organizations. But for Talia, it remained what it had always been, a place where people were treated with dignity, where dreams were supported, and where the potential of every individual was recognized and nurtured. 5 years after the confrontation at the diner, Talia stood in the original center's main hall, now expanded to include additional program rooms and a small auditorium. The walls were covered with photographs of community members, artwork created by local children, and certificates recognizing the center's various achievements. But the most meaningful decoration was a simple framed quote near the entrance. "Real strength comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult." She often thought about that morning at Rosie's diner, about the choice she had made to speak up rather than stay silent. It had been a moment of courage that had changed not just her own life, but the lives of thousands of people across multiple communities. The black card had been the catalyst, but the real power had come from the decision to use that opportunity in service of others. The centers continued to expand, reaching new communities and serving new populations. Each location told its own story of transformation, but all were united by the same core principles: respect for human dignity, belief in community potential, and the understanding that everyone deserved opportunities to thrive. Talia had learned that standing up for what was right wasn't just about individual moments of courage, but about creating systems and structures that supported justice and opportunity for everyone. As she walked through the bustling center that evening, greeting familiar faces and welcoming newcomers, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. The mysterious benefactor's gift had been more than money. It had been a chance to prove that character mattered more than circumstances, that integrity was more valuable than comfort, and that the courage to stand up for what was right could create ripple effects that extended far beyond a single moment of confrontation. The black card remained in her wallet, no longer a mystery, but a reminder of the power of believing in people and the importance of using whatever resources you have to make a positive difference in the world. And every day, as she worked to expand the network of centers and serve more communities, she carried with her the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful people are watching when you least expect it, and that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, can change not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. As Talia locked up the center each night, she would sometimes touch the black card in her wallet and whisper a thank you to the mysterious benefactor who had made it all possible. She hoped that wherever they were proud of what she had built, and that they understood how much their gift had meant not just to her, but to an entire network of communities that had been transformed by their generosity and her courage.